Hello. Welcome to I Am Wisdom with your host, Katrina Cavanough. I Am Wisdom is all about the connection between mind work and energy work, spirituality, and finding easy, everyday ways to heal your life. Katrina Cavanough is a qualified therapist and one of Australia's leading intuitives and spirituality coaches. Katrina will be taking your calls and bringing you some special guests. Settle in, relax, and enjoy the healing on I Am Wisdom with Katrina Cavanough on OMTimes Radio.
Hello, I'm Katrina Cavanough, and you are listening to the I Am Wisdom radio show. I am speaking with you now, all the way from Australia, and I'm very, very, very excited to be talking with you today. Well, this is it. This is the beginning of my first live radio show with OMTimes Radio, and today I thought that the most important thing that we could do is really get to know each other a little bit. I thought I could share some information about me, a little bit about my story, but also start to take some questions from you. If you would like to talk to me and ask a question, then what I would like to do is invite you to come across to my Facebook page. So that's Facebook.com/Katrina Cavanough, and like my page. Once you do that, there is a space that you'll be able to find there. I'm just checking now that they've managed to pop it up, where you can place your questions. Yes, it's there. Fantastic. So once you like my page, you'll be able to come across, see the post that's entitled I Am Wisdom with Katrina Cavanough, your questions and comments. And I'd like you to put your questions and comments there once you've liked my page. What kind of questions? Well, today the show is all about, as I said, me talking to you about how I found my way to be sitting in this seat right now and sharing my story with you. How I found my way to be someone who lived a very, very clear life, where I had certainly a professional life in the mainstream world of therapy, and also another side of my life, which was my spirituality. And those two sides of my life certainly stayed very, very separate until one day, many years ago, I was at work at a hospital in a busy ER, as you call it over there in the United States of America. And my job was to work with basically, I was a social worker there, and my job was and a grief therapist, and my role was to provide support to people who came in where their loved one had experienced a sudden and unexpected and tragic death. So I will talk to you a little bit more about that story then, but it was when I was doing that role where, and I had an experience where, of course, the two sides of my life came together very quickly, where I all of a sudden experienced soul-to-soul communication. What I refer to as soul-to-soul communication is the essence of me being aware of and communicating with the soul of someone who's passed away. So it came to pass, and I'll share with you soon the story, but it came to pass that I experienced soul-to-soul communication with those that were dying over the years, and that's when my life changed. But let's just rewind back a little bit. My story really begins when I was a young girl, and essentially what happened was I've never had a time when I wasn't aware of my own sense of spirituality. I've never had a time when I wasn't aware that there was a physical world and that there was also a non-physical world. And so I lived with this awareness always. When I was younger, I was very, very frightened of the non-physical world. It was very scary for me to lay in bed at night and feel the spirit energy of those who passed before us. For any child, that's really scary, and I found it, I used to feel it within my body, and I certainly used to feel it across the back of my neck, and it was a very, very frightening time. Not so much these days. That had to change. I had no choice about it, really. But anyway, back then I was very, very frightened. I was very fortunate, though, to grow up in a family where I had aunties and a grandfather who described themselves as Christian and quite religious. However, they also my auntie would describe herself as a clairvoyant and a psychic, and my grandfather was someone who was very involved in the church, yet he would read the cards. So within my family, there was never a sense of separateness around, Christianity and spirituality. For me, I consider myself to be a very spiritual person. I was raised to be a Christian person. My focus is now on a much broader sense of spirituality, and but I come from a family where there was a great openness and understanding to all things spiritual. It was wonderful, really. So I went along in my childhood and kept on experiencing these spiritual experiences. And I recall the first time that I could actually articulate an experience, and that was about the age of 8. At that age, I know from my work, my background is, and I'll tell you more about that later, but my background right now is I have about 20 years experience working as a mainstream therapist with children and families and individuals. I do a lot of relationship therapy work. I also work with children who've experienced trauma, very, very severe trauma. And by that, I mean all forms of child abuse. And I do that today still. And I also work with adults who've experienced trauma either in their early childhood or in their adult life, and I provide support to those as well. So I would have to say that over 20 years and right now, I do spend time with some of the people, with people who have experienced some of the most saddest and frightening and emotional experiences and overwhelming experiences that anyone could possibly experience. And every day I'm inspired by the fact that they keep putting one foot after the other and they make a decision to heal. So what I know about my work, having worked in the therapeutic context, is that I know at about the age of 8 is when our brains develop in a way that we can then articulate our experiences. So that's why I know that before then I, of course, had all these spiritual experiences, but it was really at the age of 8 that I could actually articulate it. And I remember waking up one morning and describing to my father that I'd had an experience with a spirit in the doorway of my bedroom. He then very quickly, acknowledged he knew who that was, and he acknowledged that very matter of factly. It was very everyday. Oh, yes, well, you can see ghosts, Katrina. That's how it works. And from then on in my family, it was just known that I could see ghosts. And so I lived this really interesting childhood and adolescence where by day I was very excited and interested in, connecting with the afterlife. But then by the evening time, I was terribly frightened and petrified is the only word I could use, petrified of the dark and petrified of all the feelings I was having. About the age of 15, I had a beautiful auntie who's Auntie Gwen, who was really became my mentor and really taught me a lot about spirituality. And what she taught me was that, Katrina, you can actually close this off, if you like. You can close off the experience of experiencing the afterlife. And so at the age of 15, I made the decision, which I now understand in my adult mind. What I did was I placed boundaries around the way I experience my spirituality. And that's just that's something I'll be talking with you about, certainly in the next, in one of the shows, because boundaries is something I'm a really huge fan of, both in my professional life, in my personal life, and certainly in the way I experience my spirituality. I talk to my spiritual team all the time and say to them, this is how it's going to happen, blah, 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 blah. Quite bossy, really I am. And they work with me all the time, so it's fantastic. So I was able to pack away my experiences of that flooding experience of uncontrolled, awareness of spiritual life. And that gave me space to be able to study and learn and grow at my own pace, which I did for the rest of my teens. And then in my 20s, I began really focusing on my career. In my 20s for me was all about completing my university qualifications. I have 2 degrees, a social work degree and a social science degree, which took me about 10 years to complete. And the completion of those qualifications and then the subsequent focusing completely on my professional career really took all of my time. I, on the side, of course, always had my spiritual development sort of simmering away, but really my focus was on my career. I I began to work in a role in my late 20s. I think it was in my late 20s, about 29 or 28 or 29 I was, where I began this role as a social worker in the hospital. And when I began this role as a social worker in the hospital, I never expected in a million years that the two sides of my life would come together. When we come back, we've got a break coming up, and when we come back from the break, I'm wanting to talk to you and share with you my very first experience about how the two sides of my life came together. I'd like to invite you to come across to in the meantime, I'd like to invite you to come across to my Facebook page, facebook.com/, Katrina Cavanough, Katrina Cavanough. If you like my page, and then if you've got any questions for me about the afterlife, perhaps you'd like to make a connection with a loved one in spirit. You may have a question about your own life. You might want some intuitive insights, and that's the place that today I can take your questions and then we can move through them, and I can answer them directly on air. We have a break coming up, and while we're coming up to the break, I'm going to talk to you about what will be happening after the break. I'm going to be sharing with you that story. And then I'm going to be sharing with you what happened over the 10 years that followed my first experience. My life changed dramatically and forever because I became aware of some of the greatest wisdoms there are about living a really amazing life. And those wisdoms for me came from the most amazing source. They came from hundreds of deaths and hundreds of souls that I ended up communicating with and sharing experiences with as they'd just passed over, or perhaps those that had died just a few hours earlier. It was a really magical time in my life, and I'm just so grateful that I have now an opportunity to share with you those stories. I also share the stories in a book, my book published by Allen and Unwin, entitled Wisdom for Your Life. And even how that came about is a story in itself, which I'll share with you after the break. Speak to you soon.
Bringing you the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio, your conscious lifestyle on steroids.
Hi, this is Angela Levesque, host of Entanglement Radio. Join me Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science and conscious healing. Entanglement Radio, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern. Transcendent talk for the conscious mind.
Being a radio host on IOM-FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Radio Namaste leads you down the yellow brick road into portals of consciousness with the blue-collar goddess as your host. Interviews with humans who could be famous or just popular, and answers to everything are on the agenda. Tune into OMTimes Radio and drop in on Thursdays at 3 Eastern. It's a different brand of enlightenment.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
Hi, you're with Katrina Cavanough, and this is I Am Wisdom on OMTimes Radio. So where were we? We were talking about my story. Essentially what happened was one day I was called into work, and it was early in my career with that specific role. I'd only been working in that role for a few months, and essentially what was happening I was working mainstream by day in a role which was in a forensic drug and alcohol service. So I was working there as a clinician for the people who used to attend that service, the forensic drug and alcohol service, were people who are really, really good people who, through their own life experience, were just making some not so good decisions for themselves and for others in the way, and those kind of decisions manifested in the form of crime and drug use. So that was very, very important work, and I felt very privileged to do that, as I do with all the work I do with people. So I would do that work by day, and then in the evening, I would go and be on call, and on the weekends. One Sunday one Sunday afternoon, I was with my husband. It was a very hot summer's day, and we were driving home. And as we drove home, we drove past a very serious motor vehicle accident. And I said to my husband, excuse me, I said to my husband, that's going to be mine. I really feel like I am going to be called into that car accident. Sure enough, when I got home, I turned my pager on at the right time. My pager went off straight away, and I was called in to attend to the family of a young woman who had passed away in that car accident. What was significant about that car accident was that it was a very difficult death. It was a very violent death. It was a very traumatic car accident. I mean, it sounds funny to say that, because what car accident isn't where, someone passes away? But I have to say, after 10 years of working in the area and working with hundreds of deaths, there are some that are more violent than others for the body. What happened next was I stood with the family as they said farewell. My role with these matters was to provide emotional support to the family as they would step through the practical process of completing a police identification, or a police ID as we used to call them. And then once the practical aspects were done, I would then provide support and allow them to spend as much time as they needed with their loved one that had passed away. What I understand to be true over the years is that I was very aware that these are people who woke up one day with their life a certain way, and then by the time they went to bed that night, their whole life had changed. Over and over again, for hundreds of people over 10 years, I was there to witness people who, in one moment or in one day, their lives had changed significantly. Someone who they loved and cared about was with them at the beginning of the day, and by the end of the day, they were no longer with them in the physical world. It was very special work and very privileged work. And as I stood there that day, that very first day, which was, because this girl was my very first car accident, you see, she was also the very first time that I witnessed parents saying goodbye to a child. And I would have to say that over the years of working, they're the most difficult deaths to attend to. Because you see, when parents say goodbye to a child, whether that child is a baby in utero, or a baby that's made it onto the planet, or whether it's an adult child, the pain and the agony of the parents as they say goodbye is always the same. It's funny to say that, because I know in every other area of my working life, I talk about individual variances, that we can all have the same situation, yet we will experience it in our own way. And of course that's true, I guess, in this. But having stood bedside with people, mothers and fathers saying goodbye to their children, it is indescribable. It is indescribable, the sound that is exactly the same for every mother. That surprised me and shocked me over the years, because I would have thought it would have been different. But it's a sound that comes from deep within the mum as she says goodbye to her child. So this day was the first day that I will never forget, that I heard for the very first time the wailing, the deep, deep expression of the most sacred emotion of the worst kind of loss for a mother. And as I stood there and heard that sound, I was really conscious of the magnitude of the responsibility that I held within my hands in that moment. And so I would do my best. I would do my best to be present, or to give as much space as was required. And to be honest, that's something that you really do gauge intuitively. Anyway, on this day, I stood bedside with his family as they said goodbye to their young daughter. And then when that was complete, and I went and completed my notes, I then went to my car. And it was about, by now, it was about 2 or 3 in the morning, or very early hours. And as I got into my car, I looked into the rear vision mirror, and there she was in spirit in the back seat of my car. Now, you have to remember that up until this point, I'm scared and frightened of the afterlife. I'm scared and frightened of the spiritual world. I was very comfortable with every other aspect of my intuition, very comfortable with my own soul and spirit, very comfortable with divination, very comfortable with working with energy to create and manifest, even from an early age of 15, very comfortable with all of that. But when it came to the point of sharing, connecting with the spirit, it just scared me. It was just so frightening. So I quickly closed my eyes, and my heart was beating very fast, and I remembered the words of my auntie, who'd showed me and taught me how to support souls as they needed to become aware of their surroundings. And not that that happens very often. It doesn't. It doesn't happen very often, not in my experience anyway. But anyway, so I recalled her words, which was to send light and love, and to speak out loud, and to help that soul cross over at that time. And I did that. I invited her to return to the light, and she did, and return to love, and she did. And in an instant, she was gone from the back seat of my car. I then felt her presence in a very calm way, and I felt a great sense of gratitude. I, of course, was so frightened, and with trembling hands, drove home, slid into bed next to my husband and snuggled into him, and felt safe once again. What was really interesting was that next morning the phone rang, and I was awoken by the phone call, and it was my beautiful auntie, my clairvoyant aunt, my psychic aunt, who had been my, really support and mentor through the years, ringing me saying, "Katrina, I have a feeling I have to ring you. What's happened?" So I then recounted to her the story of my experience with this young woman in the car. She then, which is amazing stuff. I mean, how did she know? How did she know something had happened? What happened then was I realised that this was to be part of my experience. It's really important for me in working with death in the hospitals, it's really important for me that you know that I always maintain my professionalism. I never once let the medical teams that I work with, the nursing staff that I work with, my colleagues in allied health, never the patients nor the family themselves know that I was aware and connecting with of the spiritual world. Many people have asked me why, and there's a very simple answer to that. And that, a lot of people say to me, "Gosh, didn't you want to help? Didn't you want to help and let people know? Didn't you want to say to them, look, I've got your grandmother here. She's okay. She's in spirit. She's crossed over." And I say it's a very easy no. It's a very easy no for me to say that, because for me, my professionalism was the most important thing. I was in that role providing a service to the people, and they knew me in the role of social worker. They didn't know me in the role of my capacity to connect with the spiritual world. They weren't wanting that. They weren't asking for that. And in fact, even if they'd asked for it, I don't ever refer to anything spiritual when I'm doing my mainstream professional work. So because they weren't knowing me in that context, I would never, and plus I wasn't aware of their own beliefs, but and also I'm guided by some code of ethics with my professional association. So never did I ever let the two sides of my life cross over, or never did I let, the medical teams or the nursing staff or the patients know what was happening for me. But yet it still happened, and happened time and time again, and more time. So once I was aware that this was meant to be part of my work, part of my purpose here, part of my experience of being Katrina Cavanough on the planet this time around, I sat down with my spiritual guides and our team and said to them, look, this is how it's going to happen. If I'm meant to be doing this work, I'm afraid of it. I'm happy to do this work. And by this work, I didn't really know what I meant. I just knew that it would include some component of awareness of the souls as they crossed over. I set up some very clear boundaries. This is how it's going to happen. I'll only experience this during the daylight hours when I'm away from work, and and only on shift when I'm on shift. I'll only experience it when I say it's okay. And to this day, they've worked very, very well with me with that. And like I said, we'll have a show on boundaries, and I'll talk all about that. What happened for me in the 10 years that followed was that I worked with, not that I would ever do the maths, but what actually happened was I ended up being on a TV show, which I'll talk about after the next break. And that TV show, they asked me to develop a backstory, and it was only then that I did the maths on just how many deaths I'd attended to over that 10-year period, and I worked out that it was somewhere between 400 and 500 deaths. 400 and 500 sudden and unexpected and tragic deaths, which made me understand why I was a little tired towards the end of that 10-year period. And I'm not saying that for every single one of those deaths, it wasn't that way. It wasn't that way, but for a lot of the deaths, I did experience a soul-to-soul communication with those that had passed away. And what was amazing was that as I communicated with the souls of those that were passing, because sometimes it was actually in the process of passing. They would be, for example, in between life in the resus room, and I would be communicating with them at that point. And other times it was when people came in and they already passed away, so they were DOAs, we call it in the clinical world, dead on arrival. And then sometimes it was well and truly afterwards. So I would communicate with them, and what they shared with me was an awareness of what death and dying is actually like. They share with me reflections on their own life. And those reflections became really gave me some amazing insights into what is really important in life. And over the years, I started to notice some themes. And it's those themes that I now refer to as the 5 wisdoms. And I'll be telling you more about those coming up after the break. Stay with me.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
The truth is, you can't change the world if you're broke. I know, I tried. Isn't it time you turned your life's calling into a profitable, freedom-based business? I'm Michelle Barr. Join me every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern for Sacred Success.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi, my name is Monica and I'm the host of Co-Creating Now. Give yourself an opportunity to connect with your all-knowing higher self and manifest joy, love, and peace together every Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern.
Free your mind. Expand your soul. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Hi, you're listening to I Am Wisdom with Katrina Cavanough on OMTimes Radio. So before the break, I was sharing with you my first experience of working in the hospital, working in a very busy ER, and then also, having an awareness of the spiritual soul experience of death and dying and the afterlife. I also said to you that, and what was amazing for me was that as I communicated with many of the souls as they passed over, and to be honest, I'm not sure why. I must actually connect with my spiritual team at some point and get some clarity on this, but I'm not sure why sometimes with some of the deaths, some of the people dying, I would have a soul to soul experience, yet with other times I wouldn't. I mean, I just, of course, went along with the flow, and, I was fine, because at that point in time, I was just simply experiencing this and just noticing some really interesting themes, and really on the initial few occasions, quite in awe of the process. But surprisingly, and this always happens to me, very quickly that became my everyday. It became something that just happened. It became another way I was being of service to those that were passing away. It was just very, very every day. It just, because of course it's not, for me, in my experience of communicating with the afterlife or souls who have passed over, it's very, very non-dramatic. It's very really not even that exciting. It's just very gentle and quiet and clear, and just like, I guess, essentially, you're having a conversation, or there's a few layers of energy between you and the other person. So it was just became very everyday for me, and I would just go about my life. And never in a million years at that point in time did I actually realize what was becoming of my life. So I'd like to share with you how I got from there to here, sitting with you, talking with you. Essentially what happened was I went along like that and kept on working in the hospital, kept on working in my day job as well, over the years changing, started having children, doing all of that. Amazing. Now that's a whole show in itself, and I'm happy to do a show on parenting and spirituality because, as you know, I've already said my mainstream work is I'm a specialist working with children and families and individuals and couples. And so it's amazing how those two sides of my life really are blending together beautifully in my spiritual practice. So essentially, essentially what happened was I was going along, and a few years ago I developed a real state of being unsettled. I was very unsettled, and I knew that it was time to have some kind of a career shift, but I did not know what it was. I felt within me that I would be doing something different to the work I was doing then. I knew I would always be serving people, being of service to them, helping them with their feelings and their emotions and their experiencing of themselves in their own skin and their experience of themselves in their world and relationships. I knew that would always be part of it, but I knew that me working in the way I was in the mainstream was coming to an end. I was feeling the limitations of that. And I also wanted to write, like many of us out here. I mean, most of the people listening, I'm sure, we all feel like we've got a book in us. So I really wanted to write. And what happened was, write a book. I wanted that book to be published by a publisher. I understand there's some great benefits in self-publishing, but for me, what I wanted, and I'm not sure why, but it felt right for me, what I wanted was someone to see enough value in me and my message to, I knew what my message was, by the way. I had no I'll share with you the story about how that came to be today in the show, but I had no idea what my message was, but it was to be, but I just knew I was writing a book. So for a few years, not sure what I was doing, started having babies. That kept me very busy, let me say, and nicely sleep deprived. And then I came to realize that if I was going to write a book, that what I needed was, for a publisher to want me, I needed to have a profile, which a media profile here in Australia. So at the beginning of 2011, I set the intention because by then I was using intentions and the law of attraction, and as we all do, to create the life that I was wanting. And by gosh, it's worked anyway. So I set the intention at the beginning of 2011 that I would have, by the end of that year, I would have a national profile here in Australia. Now, I had no comprehension of what that would mean. I thought I would be featured in some article in a newspaper, and that would do it. Of course, that's really quite funny when I look back now. But at the time, that's what you think. You get featured in a newspaper, and there you go. The people know about you, and off you go. What actually happened, though, very surprisingly to me, was that a few months into that year, two people came to me and said there is a national primetime television show coming on air in Australia called The One, The Search for Australia's the Most Gifted Psychic, and we think you should audition for that. Now, I was very hesitant because up until now I had been very interested in developing. It had been something on the side. I'd certainly started, running a little bit of a small practice, doing a few readings for family and friends and the odd paying client, but nothing major. And I was a little bit hesitant, but for some reason it felt right. So I applied along with, I think, several hundred, I think someone said 600 other people are roughly in Australia. And what surprised me was little did I know was my life was coming together nicely. But anyway, every round I would get through, I couldn't believe it. I'd get through the first, wow, I was into the next round, then into the next round. And then I got to the stage where I was to the final 50. They went around to the capital cities here in Australia. And so I was called to Sydney, and I think they narrowed it down to about 50 or so people, something like that. And I want to share with you some miracles that happened that actually, I believe, got me on that show. And this is how I know I was meant to be on that show, because not to be on TV per se, although that's kind of fun and I love all that stuff, but it was all about me creating this platform, responding to that intention that I'd set, that I would have a national profile here in Australia. And I've got so many countless examples of other things that have happened. So I went along to the final 50 in Sydney, and what actually happened was I was just about to go in, and I received a message very clear. I couldn't question it where it came from my spiritual team, saying, you need to know about the clairs, meaning, are you clairvoyant? Are you clairaudient? Et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm someone who, my spirituality is very everyday. And whilst I had some awareness of that, obviously I know the word clairvoyant, and had heard of the other clairs, I certainly was not someone who described myself in that way. It's just me, and I have a feeling, and I receive a message, and this is how it happens. So I quickly Googled, as we do everything, I Googled on my phone what the clairs were, worked out which ones were the way I received my messages, and can you believe that I walked into that audition, and the very first question that was asked of me was, can you please describe your intuitive ability using the clairs? I nearly fainted. So there I was able to succinctly answer that question. The other really amazing thing that happened was that I actually made it through to the final 20. So that's out of all the hundreds of people, they narrowed it down to 20 people to select 10, because you need to be in the top 10 to be on the show. And the most amazing miracle happened, and I'll never ever forget it, and I'll forever tell it, because it's such a wonderful, wonderful example of how, this story is not to share with you, oh great, here's great Katrina, I did all this great stuff. It's not about that. It's about sharing with you just how amazing miracles can be. What happened was, on that final day of 20, we were in this enormous complex of inside and outdoor areas. You could imagine a complex, a very, very large area of warehouses. Channel 7 was down in the front section. Then you've got car parks. Then you've got an enormous warehouse with mezzanine offices either side, 2 and 3 stories. And we were given the item of a crew member, and we had to tune into the item of the crew member. We had to write down some of our reflections. We were then given a map. And that map had 2 or 3 pages, because of course there was 2 or 3 layers to the entire complex and area. And we were to locate that person on the map and mark it on the map. And then we were to take a cameraman with us, and we were to go and find the person in that enormous complex. Now, of course, as if I thought I could do that. Goodness me, I've never done anything like that. I'd provided a few consultations, I developed, but nothing like that. So I sat there, and as I glanced around the room and looked at the other people who were there, I noticed that I really was sitting in a room full of some fairly well-known people. and there was little old me. So that was interesting too. I sat there, I tuned into the jury of this person, and I said to my spiritual team, I don't think I can do this. If you can help me, this is great. If I'm meant to be on this show, you'll make this happen. In that instant, I received a very clear auditory message, as clear as someone sitting beside me and speaking in my ear. I heard it outside of myself. And that message, that voice, that male voice, said to me, Katrina, top floor, and showed me a spot on the map. I marked that spot in the map. The other message I received was run, 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 because I had to run out of one side of the complex, across an enormous car park, and into another part of the complex altogether, and then run up 3 levels of mezzanine office. I'm a very tiny and petite, gorgeous female person of about 4'9". So of course the message I got was run fast, run quickly, run quickly. So I had to run really quickly. And as I reached the top of that mezzanine level, there was the crew member. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I found that crew member. To this day, I still can't believe it, really. But I did. And then weeks later, when I got the phone call from the person from the network to say, Katrina, you've been selected out of all the applicants in Australia. You've made it to the top 10. We want you on the show. And I said to Jo, how could that be? I can't believe I've made it. And she said to me, Katrina, what did you think was going to happen? You were the only person who found that person in the complex. So I knew in that instant, not so much, wow, aren't I great, that I'd found the person in the complex. I knew in that instant that I was meant to be on that show. I knew that show, I didn't know how I would go in that show, but what I knew was that show would open doors for me, which it did. It opened doors for me to get the book deal, which after the break I'm going to tell you another miracle story about how that happened. I'll also be giving a giveaway to someone who gets on to Katrina Cavanaugh's Facebook page. So that's facebook.com/Katrina Cavanough. If you pop on and like my page, I will give you a giveaway of a complimentary copy or e-copy of my book, Wisdom for Your Life. So I'll speak to you after the break. Looking forward to doing that. Looking forward to speaking to you and sharing with you the rest of the miracles that have occurred that have brought me to be sitting with you today. Speak soon.
Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Have you bought into the idea that you have to work hard for your money, that business is hard? I will share some dynamic access consciousness tools to get you out of your own way so you can create a business that actually succeeds. Join me, Simone Millisers, on The Joy of Business at 4 p.m. Mondays Eastern.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes.
Hi, you're here listening to I Am Wisdom with Katrina Cavanough. It's really, really wonderful to be bringing to you this very first show of I Am Wisdom. Each week I'll be joining you here at this time and at this space to share with you so many amazing insights and awarenesses that I've received over the years working with people and working with spirituality. For me, what's important in the work that I do is I like that the experience I have both as a therapist, as a mainstream therapist, working with people and relationships and human behavior for the past 20 years, and then my own spirituality and my understanding of spirituality and my experience of the afterlife and soul to soul communication, as well as just generally working with the energy that we are and working with the energy of the universe. I love the way that the mind work and the energy work can come together, because I know both in my own experience and in my experience working with so many of my clients that when you can combine your mind work with your energy work, then your life can really, really be different. The way I work with people is that I work with them individually, so I provide consultations. I do a lot of individual work. That work can be done face to face here in my office here in Australia, but also I offer sessions via Skype and on the phone. The individual work is always customized to what it is that you need at the time. I always set my intention to be of service to you. For some people, it may be a pure intuitive psychic reading consultation, that style of things. I'm not a huge fan of the word psychic. It's just a personal thing. I like to use the word intuition more than anything. But I know the word psychic has meaning for a lot of people, and they relate to what I'm referring to when I say it that way. So so it may be your individual session could be, it may be just a pure intuitive consultation. I also have sessions that are absolutely pure therapy and pure life coaching. And then I have sessions where people come to me and say, Katrina, please use all that you are to be of service. So that's where, of course, I'm using my intuition. I'm looking at how their past, their present, all work together to create their future. I'm looking to support them to create a better now, which of course creates a better future. And when I'm talking about a better now, I know that due to the information and the wisdoms that I've received, I know some key elements of what we need to be doing a little bit differently, twigging a little bit more so that we can feel comfortable in our own skin, comfortable in our relationships, and comfortable in our place in the world, because ultimately that's what it's really about. So this show will be about sharing with you all of that. It's about supporting you to find ways to really experience everyday wisdom in your everyday life. It's a very practical program. Each week I will be taking questions via my Facebook page. Those questions can be of an intuitive nature. They can be of a life coaching nature, a spiritual coaching nature. It can be any of those things, any and all of those things. I love to give away. I'm a very generous soul. Oh, I feel like I am. And so, each week I'd like to give away something. So, and I'll be deciding that each week. So this week, for example, I'm wanting to give away a copy of my ebook. And so I'm going to be doing that to the most recent person who's liked my page. So my page on Facebook is facebook.com/Katrina Cavanough. So if you pop there and like the page, the most recent person who likes that page will be the person who receives a copy of my ebook. And I'll announce that person at the end of today's show. So on the next show next week, I'm going to be sharing with you the 5 wisdoms that I received as a result of my experience over 10 years of soul-to-soul communication. I'll also be sharing with you next week the understandings I have about the afterlife and what death is like. And I'll be talking through with you both my experiences of what it's like and my understanding from my communication with souls, both in that hospital setting, but also in my consultation. I have to say that each time I have a consultation with people, I feel very, very privileged to be doing that work. The other way you can work with me, if an individual consultation isn't something for you, I'm also offering an amazing e-course, and for me this is my signature course. It's an online course, and it's called Healing to Happiness, the New Spirituality, because I believe that, or I know that what we have is our own energetic system. So we have our body, mind, soul, and spirit. And we also have our spiritual team. And when those two elements of our spirituality work together with the application of the wisdoms as I understand them to be, the 5 wisdoms that I refer to, when you combine those things, you really can have a very different experience of yourself and of your life. And that's what I want for people. Everything I talk about, whether it's on an online course, in an individual session, or here on the radio with you, is a sharing of my beliefs. I live, what I know to be true is that whatever you believe is what you experience. And the other really amazing fact is that it is possible for different beliefs to coexist within this same reality. That's a bit of a mind expander, but I know this to be true. It's confusing for our human minds to understand. It's bigger than our human minds to understand, but I understand it to be true. So for me, if I have a belief about something and someone else has a belief about something that's different to me, I'm really, really comfortable with that. That's okay, because I know that the two beliefs can coexist within this amazing place we call the universe. So when I'm working with you, I'm sharing with you my understanding, and because that's all I've got. And I don't say it's the answer, it's just my answer. It's the way I've come to understand it throughout all those years. So that's the kind of thing I'll be talking with you about on the program, and also sharing with you online on my online courses, and also if within individual consultations. If you would like to access one of my online courses, then you can do so by having a look at coming to my Facebook page. I feed a lot of stuff through there. And then also my website at katrinacavanough.com. I want to finish now with the story of how it is that I've come to be here. As I said, I've had these, excuse me, my note to self. The other thing another theme for today's show and for the first few shows and for all my shows will be kindness to self. So one of the learnings, as it's my first show and I'm working through the technology and all the bits and pieces, one of the themes for me is always about being kind to yourself. You'll come to know that about myself, that me and kindness go together well, and I'm a huge fan of kindness and compassion. So, and the most important kindness and compassion that we can have is kindness and compassion to ourselves. So the fact that I'm sitting here now, my throat's getting a little scratchy. I really need to be having a glass of water by my side, and I don't. I'm going to feel very kind to myself about that, and I'm just going to laugh away and think, goodness me. So you'll just have to experience me clearing my throat for the last few minutes. And bear with me. Send me some healing, everyone. Get my throat clear. Thank you very much. I feel I can feel it now. Thank you very much. So I wanted to finish off today with the end of my story. How was it that I came to be working mainstream? Then I ended up with being on a TV show, which was phenomenal. And then how is it that I have come to the place where, for me right now, my work is about my book, which is The Wisdom for Your Life, this radio show. I'm also a spirituality coach on a beautiful, wonderful platform here in Australia called Balance by Deborah Hutton. Again, that happened. It was a miracle how that happened. Some of the other coaches on that program are Olivia Newton-John and some Olympic athletes, Kieran Phelps. Sorry, Kieran Phelps isn't an Olympic athlete. She's a very well-known person here in Australia in the medical profession. So it's phenomenal to have that platform, and I am the spirituality coach there, and I write blogs all the time, and there's a link there on my host page to get there. I'm also a regular contributor to mariashriver.com, and I love writing for Maria, and so you can read some of my work there as well as my own web page. So how did it come to pass that I'm now writing regularly sharing my work and my message into an international platform? I've now have a book published by one of the biggest publishers here in Australia, Allen and Unwin. I also have a beautiful meditation CD published by another wonderful publisher, Blue Angel Publishing. And Blue Angel distributes my CD across the world. And that CD is Happy Little Hearts, and it's a special meditation CD for children, focusing on healing and happiness. How did it come to pass? So I completed the TV show, and I then sent a book proposal to a number of publishers. And what's amazing is, out of all of the publishers here in Australia, I had an amazing woman invite me to come and meet with her. And she sat down with me and she said, Katrina, we're not going to publish the book that you've proposed. And I thought, goodness me, gosh, I could have stayed home for that one. And she's such a lovely lady, though. I just enjoyed her company so much anyway. What we're going to be doing, she said, the way I choose my authors, or the way I'm guided to know who to, choose or refer to her managers in the publishing world, the way I'm guided is I receive messages from my spiritual friends, for her spiritual team, and they're saying to me that they would like you to be an author. And they're saying to me that they would like you to write about, not the book you've proposed, but to write about your experiences in the hospital and your experiences with the afterlife and your experiences with death and dying and what happened on a spiritual level. Would you do that? Of course, I said yes. The book's been written. It's now available on throughout Australia and New Zealand. It's available in it was released in 2014 in the US and Canada, and is available online in the usual places like Amazon and all that kind of thing. Wisdom for Your Life is the name of the book. And I have to tell you, the creation of the book, the path that I've just described to you of my life and how all these elements came together, truly, it's all bigger than me. Much, much, much bigger than me. I am someone who's facilitating a process, and that's what I intend to do with you here every week. Every week I'll be coming online to share with you my message, the information I have, and amazing wisdom on how you can live your life. You've been listening to I Am Wisdom with Katrina Cavanough, and I'm really looking forward to sharing some time with you next week. Bye-bye.